see these statements. I don't think you necessarily should do what the Old Testament says, but then you shouldn't take things from it to support you if you're not going to take the whole thing. So this again looks like a promise of return from the Babylonian captivity. This also looks like later. So, Micah is a mixed thing. And he even has line 10, to Babylon you must go. Line 10, there you will be rescued. So this is certainly later. This does show the signs of having been, worked over. And Amos and Hosea didn't show these signs. Amos and Hosea didn't have anything about Babylon, return from the Babylonian captivity. That's going to be in the second part of Isaiah. It looks like someone has just culled some things from Isaiah and called it Micah. I don't know how that happened, and I can't even tell you. So everything is a bit confused here, but now, writhe, cry out, daughter of Zion, line 10, like a woman in labor. It's like Hosea, or barren who did not bear. And you will have to live in an open country, you will go to Babylon, and so on. And many nations, line 11, will be mustered against you. That's sort of like Ezekiel, where all the nations come to Israel and will be destroyed in the Armageddon scenario that you get in Ezekiel. So Zion, you see, is in ruins. When was Zion in ruins? 700 BC now. So again, it's difficult to understand what's going on. I find Micah very confusing, but maybe just read it for the fun of it. Whatever inspiration you see is there. But if you want to try to get a grasp for its homogeneity, it's very tough. Well, let's see what else he says. They don't understand Yahweh, the Lord's purpose, his thoughts. You've been threshed, and it's as if you've been trampled down, and you will, I don't understand all this. And more about fortifications. And then chapter 5. This is a Davidic promise here, which is taken to be a messianic promise, which is taken, of course, to reinforce Jesus' situation too, and why Jesus should be born in Bethlehem, which the New Testament is anxious to have him do. I have Bethlehem in parentheses. It says, but you Ephratah. How many have Bethlehem Ephratah? How many just have Ephratah? What do you have? What do you have? Bethlehem Ephratah. Bethlehem Ephratah.
Ephratah, but Bethlehem in parentheses.
Yeah, I think probably in the original Hebrew wasn't there, and that the author wants you, the editor wants you to know what Ephratah is, because Ephratah is another name for Bethlehem. And it comes out strongly, and again in Isaiah. The least of the clans of Judah. Well, I didn't realize that David was from the least of the clans of Judah. The one who will rule over Israel. Now, that's the Christian promise. It's also the Davidic promise. Because David is from Ephratah, Bethlehem. That's where he comes from. Now, Jesus, 1,000 years later, the people who are presenting Jesus in the Scripture feel that Jesus too must be from Bethlehem. But there's a passage in one of the Gospels that really makes you wonder about that, where the crowd comes to Jesus and said, we thought the Messiah had to come from Bethlehem. And that particular passage doesn't say, well, I did. Yeah, I was born there. No, it doesn't say that in that particular passage. I think it's either in Luke or Mark, that passage. You can look it up. You can find these things just by getting a concordance. Look up Bethlehem and you'll find the passage lickety-split. Concordance are really useful to have. Yeah, we thought the Messiah had to come from Bethlehem. And Mark and John don't treat the place of his birth at all. Because they're not, well, if they knew where he was born, they probably would have been anxious to tell us. But they obviously are not either interested or sure of that particular point. It's Matthew and Luke that are giving us the Bethlehem birth stories, and they both give us two different presentations. As you may know, in Matthew, the storyline goes, Jesus' family is living in Bethlehem, but Herod, the Jewish king, well, he's an Arab king, but anyway, the so-called Jewish king, has a prophecy that he's going to be supplanted, and therefore he wants to kill all the Jewish children, and therefore, after Jesus is born, his family flee to Egypt. And then, like Joseph, going down to Egypt, and Joseph is the father, and then they get into the thing, and Matthew loves scriptural passages, I have called my son out of Egypt, he applies that to it. But you see, Luke doesn't know anything about going to Egypt, and neither does Mark or John. The reason Matthew has it is he wants to explain how he wasn't killed in that particular scenario that he's presented us. What's Luke's scenario? Luke's scenario is they're from Galilee, Nazareth, and there's supposed to be a census. And for some reason, if that were the case, by the way, that everyone had to go back to their native city to be counted, the whole Roman Empire would be in total shambles. I mean, that also is not very convincing presentation, sorry to be a naysayer there. But the authors are looking for reasons, what I'm trying to get is to get him to Bethlehem to be born. They want to get him to Bethlehem to be born. So Luke has read Josephus, we know that. And Josephus speaks of the census of Cyrenius. But unfortunately, the census of Cyrenius was in 6 to 7 AD after the Romans imposed direct Roman control so that they could see what they were controlling for tax purposes. Before that, they had let Herodian kings and others be in control. And the problem, you see, Herod did die in 4 BC, which means Matthew has Jesus born sometime before 4 BC, whereas Luke has him born after 7 AD, both because of the Bethlehem situation. They're both trying to solve the Bethlehem situation, and neither of them, and then one, of course, is probably written in a totally different place than the other, so they don't know, maybe 100 or 200 years later, they're going to collect them all together in the same volume, and then you're going to see a glaring contradiction. But obviously never bothered anyone over 2,000 years. So, yeah.
So the Jewish interpretation of this.
There's no Jewish interpretation.
It would be a Davidic.
Oh, this, yeah.
Davidic.
No Jewish interpretation.
Or just a, I mean, just a.
That's, I think, it's not Jewish. I mean, this guy doesn't know a Jesus.